Thanks for joining us for this week's presentation with Molly Hashimoto, who will be sharing some of her work and perspective on art in Wild Oregon and across the West. My name is Chandra Legui. I'm Oregon Wild Senior Conservation Advocate, and I'll be our guide through this webcast this evening. If anyone's new to these webcasts and to Oregon Wild, I'll just give you a brief orientation before we begin. Oregon Wild works to protect and restore the wild lands, wildlife, and waters in our state. This year, we've been celebrating our 50th anniversary, which means we've advocated for public lands, wildlife and their habitat, wild and scenic rivers, and native forests that grow across the state since 1974. Before we go further, I would like to just offer gratitude to the lands we're talking about tonight, and for those who have lived here in Oregon since time immemorial. I'd like to acknowledge the continuing presence of Indigenous peoples on this land today. The history of tribes in Oregon is complex and nuanced and includes many colonial legacies and wrongdoings like forest removal that have long-lasting and current impacts to both people and the landscapes that they inhabit. It's important to not only acknowledge Indigenous people on the land, but continue to do meaningful work by supporting them in the present, respecting and uplifting their sovereignty, and taking action. You can find some additional resources on Oregon Wild's website or other sources that you choose. One of the ways that we do our work at Oregon Wild is through educational programs like this and engaging folks like you out there to support our work. So we appreciate those of you who bought tickets to our raffle tonight. We'll do that drawing tomorrow and email the winners. In addition to Oregon Wild's offerings, which include a book that I wrote about hiking in Oregon's ancient forests and one of our new t-shirt designs, we also have one of Molly's Trees of the West books tonight. And you can still get raffle tickets where you signed up for the webcast earlier. Tomorrow we'll email out a video of this webcast, and it'll also be posted on our website, so you can feel free to share. And stay tuned for more exciting webcasts coming up this winter. Next week, our staff will be discussing the recently released draft amendments to the Northwest Forest Plan, and we've got other authors and wildlife experts coming up as well. So now I'm pleased to welcome our presenter this evening, Molly Hashimoto. After Molly's talk, I'll come back on for just a brief update on some of Oregon Wild's work before we get to questions and answers. If you do have questions that come up during the program, please use the little Q&A bubble that you will find on your Zoom screen. And we will get to those questions at the end and try to get through as many as possible. So Molly Hashimoto is an award-winning artist dedicated to connecting people of all ages to nature through hands-on art experiences. She teaches and leads plein air watercolor workshops around the West, including at the North Cascades Institute, the Yellowstone Forever Institute, and the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology here on Oregon's coast. Her paintings and prints have been published extensively as note cards and calendars, and she's the author of 4 books that are artist guides to the colors, birds, and trees of the West and to the Mount Rainier National Park. Molly lives in Seattle. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you, Chandra.
Yeah, and let me figure out how to stop my screen share so that you can start your screen share. All right, you should be good to go.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining me tonight. I'm going to go ahead and begin my slideshow, and you'll see me talking about it. I'm going to get into my screen share. And I want to thank Chandra for inviting me. I'd like to start by saying that almost all the art that I do is inspired by my adventures and trips to parks, public lands, all of them. That includes city parks, state parks, national parks, and Bureau of Land Management lands. And without those, my inspirations would definitely not be what they are. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about how I got started as an artist. My dad bought us all of the Golden Nature guides, and Among them were trees. And I mainly look at the pictures in these books. I was just a child at the time. I didn't really read them or pay a lot of attention to the scientific data in them, but I was really captivated by the pictures. And I've always been a book person. Years ago, I worked at Elliott Bay Books in Seattle, used to be in Pioneer Square. And I started collecting books at that time. And I'm just going to show you a few of my collection because it's pretty vast. Um, Many of them I purchased while visiting Portland. Powell's Books is one of my favorite spots to go. A trip to Portland just isn't complete without a trip to Powell's, and I've found so many great books there. Here's a few more. I want to bring your attention to the Donald Culross Peattie book, A Natural History of Western Trees. His writing is wonderful, and if you haven't read it before, I'd really like to recommend that. And I had to buy many of these to do the research I needed to do for the book Trees of the West. And I've been hiking in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest since I moved here many years ago in my 20s. And I was always fascinated by the shapes that they assumed in high altitude and coastal situations. And I want to go back to show you a book, Timberline by Stephen Arno. He wrote that few people gazing out upon a timberline for the first time can imagine how many interacting phenomena are involved in this forest frontier. And those things would include things like wind, radiation, snowfall, whether they grow on north or south-facing slopes. I'd recommend that book to anybody who's interested in high elevation trees. Anyway, so that one that I showed you, that is a mountain hemlock grove that I saw up near the railroad grade on Mount Baker in Washington. And I don't know whether these trees formed by layering or whether it's a single specimen that just has multiple trunks, but trees take a lot of strange forms in high altitude situations where there's heavy snow. Here's another etching that I did. That last one was an etching too. And this was a mountain hemlock that I saw on the Pacific Crest Trail, leaning out over a precipice. I've always really liked this etching for that reason. This was a sketch, a plein air sketch I did while teaching a class for the North Cascades Institute. And this is a much larger specimen of a mountain hemlock. And high altitude trees of all sorts are my, just the ones I love most. And the whitebark pine is a really interesting tree in that it often dies back and yet has lower branches that renew and are pretty much bring the tree back to life. And this was a specimen that I saw at Crater Lake. This one's a block print. And perhaps you've heard of the 19th century German explorer and scientist Alexander von Humboldt. On one of his expeditions, he climbed Mount Chimborazo in the Andes, and there he observed alpine species like the ones that he was familiar with in the Swiss Alps. He noted the context of plants, their elevation, soil, and climate. He wasn't as interested in taxonomy as he was in creating a fluid and connected system where all things were related. He wrote that nature is a living whole, not a dead aggregate. And this poster, I mean, that's what it looks like. It's a giant illustration that he did, which he called the Naturgemälde. And I wanted to show you a close-up of it. You can see some species on here that you might recognize from the Pacific Northwest. We've got Vaccinum. I'm not really great with pronunciation, so bear with me. And Oxalia, I recognize those. Salix, that's a willow. Taxus, that's a yew. I think that's really neat because this is South America we're talking about, but these plants live at elevations around the world that are similar, and that helped him come up with his theories. So Trees of the West offers portraits in sketches, paintings, prints, and etchings of 46 species in 8 distinctive biogeographic regions. And, you can see them here. This is one of the pages from the book, and it just outlines which regions that I'm covering in the book. We even included Southwest deserts, even though the species there are not actually trees. I wanted to back up just a little bit to tell you about my art background. I've been doing illustrations for Pomegranate, a Portland company, for many years. And they've published calendars like this one, and cards and books that feature my block prints and watercolors. And always the subjects are birds, trees, and flowers. I'm glad that they like these subjects because that makes it easy for me to create art for them. I got started keeping sketchbooks after a visit to Yellowstone many years ago, and I saw Thomas Moran's field sketches at the Albright Visitor Center in Mammoth Hot Springs. This is the Firehole River, and I really love his field sketches because they're very fresh. And, if you've ever seen his giant oil paintings, they're kind of labored and extremely romanticized. The field sketches, really have more faithfulness to reality. And I really loved them. And it really inspired me. It made me feel like I could have been right there with him. Unfortunately, the Albright Visitor Center moved those sketches, and really they're just reproductions, but they moved them downstairs when they remodeled it. And they really don't take a prominent place in the exhibits. And I think it's really a shame because when I think what they did for me, I just feel I wish that they could do that for other people. And they really only have a couple now that they have on display. But if you want to see his original work, you can go to the Heritage and Research Center in Gardner, and you could make a request to see his sketchbooks and some of his original watercolors. And after seeing Moran's work, I got interested in other artists who'd explored the West. And one that I really, really loved was Karl Bodmer. He was a Swiss artist that accompanied Maximilian, a German scientist who was kind of modeling himself on von Humboldt. And he took a journey with, Bodmer took a journey with Maximilian up the Missouri River. And the goal was for him to illustrate the species they saw, the landscapes, and the native peoples. And this Native American on the cover is, I believe he was a Mandan. And there were many tribes that they saw. And I think some of his native portraits are among the most powerful ever. But I loved his landscapes, and I wanted to go there and see them for myself. So this particular stretch is called the White Cliffs, and it's really neat. You have to get in a canoe, or at the time I did it, there was one guy operating a power boat, and it's the wild and scenic Upper Missouri River in north central Montana. So I just copied a few of the things that I'd seen that Bodmer did. I wanted to try them out myself. This is the Seven Sisters, and this was Citadel Rock. So I really got kind of carried away with the sketchbooks after that, and this is just some of them. These are just some of them. I would say probably 80% of the work in these sketchbooks is really not all that good, but it's just a way of honoring your experiences, I think, and learning even more after you do a trip, because not all the work was done in plein air. A lot of it was done from photos I took on trips that I made. So I got started doing some classes for Yellowstone Forever and also North Cascades. And here I am sitting with some students at the Diablo Lake overlook off Highway 20 in the North Cascades. These are just some small thumbnail sketches I did when teaching for the North Cascades Institute, and these appear in the book Colors of the West. they're fun. You know, they're very small, and I've always said to people that they kind of remind me of a kind of a cinematic experience. You know, it's just a whole bunch of little images that bring to mind the entire experience. So these are just some of my materials, my sketchbook and palette. And there's the cover of Colors of the West. That book is divided into chapters based on color. So green includes many, many trees. And I also talk about my palette. These are, this was a very quick plein air sketch in the North Cascades of some alders and vine maples. This was a scene from the Bridge Creek campground. I really like this because it shows that diagonal of a mountain slope. And these are, this is a vine maple seen on the shores of Diablo Lake. And the color of the lake is really, it really is that color. People don't believe it, but it is really that color. And it's because it's glacial melt. And it's quite stunning. As the summer progresses, it becomes even more marked, that kind of greenish turquoise. It's hard to describe the color. Teal, maybe. It's fun to watch it progress throughout the summer as the regular snow melt evaporates, and then it gets into glacial melt. This is a big leaf maple. We've lots of them in the Pacific Northwest, and I like all the undergrowth, the understory too. In the book, and also in Trees of the West, I explained how to mix colors, and mixing greens is really, really tricky. I mean, you can use a green right out of the tube, but if you mix a few different colors, you can get a whole range of greens, which I prefer to do. And I have done some etching too. These are the copper plates for a couple of the etchings, and those tools are what I use to incise into the copper plate. This kind of requires a studio because you have to dip the plate in an acid bath. And I don't really want to have that kind of material in my house. So I do this up at the Pratt Fine Arts in Seattle. And this is a scene with some alders, birch, vine maples. And now I'm back to the hemlocks, the mountain hemlocks. This is part of that same grove. These are two different individuals that I talked about earlier that were growing near the railroad grade on Mount Baker. I love the gracefulness of the foliage on a mountain hemlock. So I've tried this different ways. This is a watercolor of it. And this is a block print, and you can see, you know, it's very, very different. The watercolor is more subtle. The block print's really quite bold and really in your face, but has a certain power. We are really lucky in the Northwest to have larches. I've seen a lot of big larches, big Western larches in Oregon, and there are some in Washington too, but what I've seen mostly are the alpine, subalpine larches in the North Cascades. And so this particular watercolor sketch was done below the early winter spires at Washington Pass. And at the North Cascades Institute, I've often gone up and taught a class in October, trying to time it for the gold color on the larches, because it's really worth seeing when you can do that. This was a block print I did of some spruce, Engelmann spruce, subalpine firs, and the subalpine larch. And subalpine firs are very prominent in alpine settings, as I'm sure you know. This was a block print I did of Rainier at Nisqually Vista. You can see in the foreground, I have some pretty simply illuminated or illustrated glacier lilies avalanche lilies, and the firs in the foreground. I decided to do a block print of a foxtail pine, one of the most magnificent conifers. There's a guy named Aljo Sfarjan who wrote a book about conifers worldwide, and he claimed that this tree was the most beautiful of all the conifers. It has this rich cinnamon-colored bark, and it just contrasts so gorgeously with the white granite of the Sierra Nevada or snow, one or the other. So I didn't get to go see this tree because it's rather remote, and I wanted to do a print. So what I did was I found a really old book with it's out of print, probably from the 50s. And there was a really neat black and white photo. So I used that as my inspiration for this print. And sometimes before I do a print, I'll do a sketch first, and just to try it out. So that's what this is, some marker and colored pencil, just a preliminary sketch. Here is the block. I carve it on a very easily carved material called safety cut. I have done linoleum prints, but they are really, really hard on the wrist, and I've got some arthritis, and I can't manage that. So the safety cut's quite a bit easier to carve. So that's what the block looks like after I've carved it. And these are the tools I use, made by Speedball. And, they're just different gouges. Some create really fine lines, some create thicker lines. Others, you use to clear out some of the material when you want it white so that you can tint it later or leave it white. And that's what the print looks like before I tinted it. And here it is after I've tinted it. And I did find that the granite was a little challenging because if you've been to the Sierras or Yosemite, it's very, very white. And just having it white makes it look like snow. So kind of had to use a variety of grays, blues, kind of rose-colored, but still very pale. And I've been to Yosemite, I think now it's 6 times, and each time I see something that really amazes me. And one of my favorite things there are the Shasta firs, also known as red firs. There's huge, huge stands of them on the way up to the Tioga Road, all the way up to Olmsted Point. This particular young individual I saw on the Fisher's Trail, which is on the way to Glacier Point, but I saw it one autumn, and it was just so beautiful. The new foliage was blue-green, and there was fall color around it, and I don't know, it was just so stunning. I had to do a painting of it. And that too, I took a picture, and I did that when I got home. Something like this would be pretty hard to execute, on plein air. Here we've got El Capitan, and also seen in the fall. And these are Fremont cottonwoods and the Merced River. I was just there this October, and every year things are different. They had a very hot summer, and there weren't enough cold nights and probably not enough moisture. So I would say the fall color this year was somewhat disappointing, but honestly, it's never disappointing to be there because the granite monoliths are always there, and they're just really stunning. Here are some cottonwoods seen on the upper Missouri River. And yes, I'm looking at them from a great height. This is called Decision Point, the place where the Lewis and Clark expedition had to decide whether they were on the Missouri or the Marias River. And you'll notice, though, the trees are kind of stunted, especially compared to those Fremont cottonwoods. And obviously, it just shows how the more benign conditions of Yosemite, can create huge tree growth, whereas in the cold, dry atmosphere of Montana, things don't get so big. And at Yellowstone, I really love the aspens. They don't have vast stands of them, but where they are, they're really beautiful. So I did this pen and watercolor sketch there. And this was another scene above the Mammoth Terraces. There are some really nice stands of aspens up there. Place that I teach every year is Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. Chandra mentioned that. It's a really wonderful place. You folks from Oregon, you're probably aware of it, but they have a great selection of classes with really good teachers throughout the summer. And I've been lucky enough to do it. Gosh, I think I've been there about 13 times, and I never get tired of the Sitka spruce there. They just amaze me. And this was a scene that I saw one morning walking down to Salmon River outlet into the Pacific, and there was mist coming through the trees, and it was just very memorable, very much a coastal scene. Last year and the year before, I taught a class for Sitka specifically on the Sitka spruce, and we used all kinds of different media to illustrate the trees. It was really fun. I think everybody had a good time. Here you see the cones and the branches. This was a meadow scene right on the grounds of Sitka Center. There's all kinds of cool wildlife there. I've seen elk. One time I even saw a weasel, a mother weasel with about 10 of her kits. I think that's the right term for the babies, but it was amazing. They were running across the patio. And I am so fond of the Sitka spruce that I even like to grow them myself. And this little cultivar is called papoose. I joined the American Conifer Society this year just because I do really love gardening, and conifers are among my, well, they are my favorites. And so I've got a small collection, and it's really fun. I like imagining the wild versions of these as I enjoy them in my garden. I mentioned that we even did stuff from the Southwest, even though these things are not truly trees. The Joshua tree is a member of the yucca family, but this was a lot of fun doing this sketch. And this particular scene is from Joshua Tree in California. And these are the pens I used to do it. I just used these grayscale pens and did some varying colors, varying values of gray. It's a good way to start. You know, if you're really a little insecure about color, I think doing value studies like this can be very good for you. And just talking real briefly about Birds of the West, I just wanted to share the books with you. Birds of the West, I actually wrote before Trees of the West, and in it there are 100 species, and they're represented in different art media, from quick sketches to watercolors, block prints, and etchings. And the book explores 7 habitats, including forests and woodlands. And it features some of my favorite species. It's hard to say which, but I'll show you a few of them. The kingfisher. This individual I saw at Magnuson Park, which is below my house in Seattle, and the bird took many different poses, and I was just down there with my camera, and I took a bunch of different photos. And I did this one on a gray paper, and I used white gouache along with watercolor to bring out the beautiful white of the belly of the bird and the throat. And this is a great horned owl. The mother is on the left, the fledgling is on the right, strangely looking a whole lot bigger than the mother. But this bird was definitely ready to fly. And I did an etching of the mother. I had a different photo of her that I used as my basis for this etching. And that's my plate that I used, and some of the color that I used to get that bluish color on the bird. Clark's grebes, I saw these at the Klamath Basin Wildlife Refuge. And, I wish that I had been able to get a picture of them doing their courtship dance. Of course, I couldn't get my camera out fast enough, but I did get these lovely photo of their swimming in unison. And I knew I was going to have to do some art of that. So this one I did on a gray paper, same way as the kingfisher. And I decided to do a block print, and I wanted to kind of make it look a bit like a Japanese print. So I simplified things quite a bit. And the Stellar's jay, we all know them very well because they make themselves so well known by their raucous cries, but they're so beautiful and really a lot of fun. And this is a calliope hummingbird that I saw up in the mountains one summer. I was wearing a fuchsia colored t-shirt and this bird was buzzing me. I actually thought it was an insect at first, and then I realized that it was a hummingbird. So I guess if I really had to tell you my very favorite bird, it's the American dipper. And I've seen them. I'm just going to tell you all the places I've seen them because it's amazing. The Gardner River in Yellowstone, the Skykomish in Washington, the Wenatchee in Washington, the Deschutes River in Oregon, the Virgin River at Zion National Park in Utah, and the Merced River in Yosemite. And they're gray, so you kind of have to watch for their motion because they're not really that obvious. But if you just look around rocks, you'll often see them. They like fast running water, and you probably know they're around all winter long, and they sing all winter long. And I wanted to just say briefly about Mount Rainier National Park. I've been traveling there since I was in my early 20s after I moved to Seattle. And I know it pretty well from all the trips that I've made. In it, I visit old growth forests like Grove of the Patriarchs. And I went to waterfalls, painted lots of wildflowers and the mountain itself, writing about history, geology, and I tell a lot of personal stories about my trips there. These are the twin Douglas firs in the Grove of the Patriarch. I did this one in honor of my twin Jane because I have an identical twin. She lives in New Zealand, and I thought she would really like this. And this is a very typical meadow, high altitude meadow at Rainier. They exist, in all the Cascade volcanoes. It's a heather, huckleberry, and subalpine fir and hemlock meadow. And finally, just close by telling you I've recently finished a new book for Mountaineers Books called Wildflowers of the West. And this is going to be the cover image. The graphic designer is still working on the titling and everything, but my friend Paul and I had so much fun researching this book. We've been all over Oregon, all over the West, looking for wildflowers, sometimes being frustrated by weather conditions, things being late, and all the kinds of things that you run into when you're researching. But these are a couple of images. This is a milk vetch and a bee that we saw in Utah. And this is fireweed up from the Methow Valley with some burnt forest. So I really appreciate all of you being here, and I'm quite open to any questions and any comments that you have. I don't actually see the Q&A, so maybe Chandra, you could help me out with that.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. And actually, we'll get to the Q&A in just a minute. I'll give people a few minutes to enter questions by clicking the Q&A box. And I'm going to take a few minutes to touch on a little bit of Oregon Wild's most pressing work before we get there. So thank you so much. That was amazing. And I too really love Sitka spruce and dippers. So we've got that in common.
That's great.
Well, if you can stop sharing your screen
Uh,
for just a moment, Molly, I can get back to mine.
Okay,
Awesome. Um, thank you.
did that work, Chandra, or do I need
Yes,
more?
yes. I'm just getting mine back up there. All right, you got that. All right. Um, well, yeah, again, I'll just take a couple of minutes to remind folks about some of the work Oregon Wild does, and especially as we enter the next 4 years with the new presidential administration, where that really affects the work that we do. And that's primarily because we work across Oregon on mostly public lands, federal public lands. Most of our work has been done over our 50-year history on these lands, and that includes about half of Oregon, primarily managed by the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. And you can see on this map that the green are forests and the sort of tan color is the Bureau of Land Management. And you can see some of that in Western Oregon, which are our Oregon BLM forests known as ONC lands. There's also those high desert landscapes, such as the Owyhee Canyon lands managed by the BLM. We have some national wildlife refuges, one national park featured in Molly's work there with the white bark pine, and some national monuments on our federal public lands. And these lands are often managed for multiple purposes, including logging, mining, and grazing, but also for recreation, wildlife habitat, and wilderness, depending on the various laws and management plans that apply to them. Federal agencies with public and congressional input carry out federal direction to preserve or manage those lands. So that's one of the reasons why we focus there, and why I mentioned that we see an impact with a change in administration. These public lands are important for just a wide variety of reasons. Obviously, they're important inspiration for art, as Molly mentioned. They're home to native wildlife species, including those that we've pushed to near extinction and that rely on habitat on public lands. They're necessary for providing clean water for fish, like our iconic salmon runs, and for drinking water for our communities. And these lands are the places where we most often go to recreate, do art, find respite from the modern world, and they're essential for mitigating and even combating climate change. So Wild's work has focused here in large part because federal environmental laws have provided tools for their protection, and because of all these shared values that we find on public lands. Over our history, we've been successful in using environmental laws as well as public pressure and grassroots activism to protect more than 2 million acres of wilderness, many endangered species in their habitat, waterways that run through our communities, and plenty of other open spaces that people use for cultural and spiritual purposes. And we've seen plenty of attacks on the protections and laws that we use from those who seek to exploit public lands and the forests, waters, and minerals they contain. From weakening requirements for environmental analysis under the National Environmental Policy Act to flat out ignoring scientific research and delisting endangered species. We've seen Congress and federal agencies led by previous administrations, such as George W. Bush and Trump, and that have challenged what we stand for. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The next 4 years will likely see plenty of those attacks. We anticipate that we'll see protections for mature and old growth forests threatened. Many of you may know that we've made amazing progress the last 3 years towards protecting forests as the natural climate champions that they are. And this will probably take a back burner as we work to instead defend large and old trees and forests across the state. A proposed amendment for the Northwest Forest Plan that could be finalized in the coming year will likely lead to much more logging in our oldest forests, and our success in stopping Trump's rollback to longstanding large tree protections in Eastern Oregon, in the last administration, may come up and be challenged once again. We also know that it will be difficult to pass any proactive protection measures in Congress. such as the River Democracy Act that we've been working on so hard for the last few years. And we'll have to be aware of congressional legislation that might weaken laws for public lands. We know that shrinking national monuments and opening more public lands to oil and gas development has been a priority for the Trump administration. So we are going to be ready to defend the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument here in Oregon and stand with partners across the country to fight against the privatization of our shared public lands. But I know that was doom and gloom. But Oregon Wild has never been a group to back down from a fight for what we cherish most. So we'll be here working with allies in the forest defense, climate, and social justice movements to do all of this work and to involve all of you so that these beautiful places are here for future generations. So I just wanted to thank you for being here with us and supporting us as we do this work. All right, with that, I will get to the Q&A, and I haven't been looking at what's been coming in. So let me just pull that up. Well, first of all, Molly, an easy one maybe. You recommended a book at the very beginning by Donald somebody, and somebody asked about that, and others might want to catch that as well.
Sure. Yeah, and I can probably put it in the chat too. It's Donald Culross Peaty. Yeah, I will write it. Natural history.
Great, thank you.
History of Western trees.
History of Western trees. Great. All right. Let's see. Do you have a favorite medium to work in, Molly? I know you went over a couple of the styles, but do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I think my favorite has been the one that I began with, which was watercolor. It seems to express some of the deepest feelings I have about nature. I do really like the block print medium for the excitement of seeing birds and certain beautiful tree forms, but I think my response to nature might be a little more deeply expressed with watercolor.
Well, your watercolors that you shared were incredibly beautiful, so I keep working on with that.
Yeah.
So someone has a question about sorry, and I'm trying to like make total sense of it, but your is that the organization that relates to your Sitka cultivar. You mentioned joining a group.
The American Conifer Society. It's a lot of people working in the nursery trade. So in a way, I would say they're more interested in cultivars, but they're a really fun bunch. And I've been on a couple of their field trips, and I've been blown away by how much they know about trees. And yeah, it's very cheap to join, and they have some great field trips.
Cool. Someone would like to know if you're going to be at Sitka in 2025.
Yes, I am. I'll be there in August, and I'm going to be doing a little preview of my Wildflowers of the West book. Kind of thinking that people might come with some of their favorite species, and we'll be trying them out in some different sketching and water-based media.
Cool. Well, I'm kind of curious because I'm not an artist, but I, of course, so love being out in nature. Like how, like if you could describe a little bit about how, just being an artist and doing art has changed the way that you look at the world, maybe over time.
Yeah, well, I really think that I read this quote by Henry James, and it was something about try to be one of these people upon whom nothing is lost. In other words, I think being an artist or a writer or a photographer or a scientist, you will become one of those people upon whom nothing is lost. You'll notice so many more things. And I'd say that's what it's done for me.
Yeah, I mean, even just having any excuse to look more closely and maybe go more slowly, whether it's art or writing or I don't know, taking your toddler on a walk is a good excuse for seeing things in a new way. That's great.
Well, one thing that I teach for the Yosemite Conservancy, and the director there, she was very kindly shared a quote from the book Colors of the West. And I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something to the effect that, a lot of younger people, and I was one of them, of course, you're in a big hurry, you're paddling or you're climbing or you're, trying to get to a summit. And sometimes you miss things, because you're in a big rush. So I think when you slow down enough to just sit down and do some art, draw, take a picture, just sit there and look at it, I think you'll take in a lot more.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Use those benches that we find out in the park or
right.
someone asked roughly what percent of your work is watercolor, etching, and woodblock. And I guess that could be maybe what you do, but also maybe what is published.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Pomegranate, the publisher in Portland, they've done really well with the block prints that I do. So I've probably done over 100 block prints for them. But when you say percentage, because I have all those sketchbooks, I guess I'd have to say probably 80% of the work is sketches and paintings, and then maybe 15% is the block prints, and maybe 5% are etchings. And I also do other types of printmaking. Yeah.
Yeah, the printmaking and etching would be more time consuming, as you described.
Yes.
Takes more specialized equipment.
That's right. Yes, it's very technical. The block prints aren't very technical. I teach a class in that a few times a year, few times a year for Winslow Art Center. It's a place that offers Zoom classes, and I do it in one day for 3 hours. And essentially I just go through the whole process. So that's not very technical, but the etching is quite technical. And you would want to go to a printmaking studio. I bet you have them in Eugene and in Portland for sure. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Somebody mentioned that that they took a class from you at the North Cascades Institute and that you were very kind and helpful to a rank beginner watercolor artist. And I guess my question out of that is, what would your, number one piece of advice be to a beginner watercolor artist?
Um, that's a really good question. I just always tell people that, you're having fun and you're not trying to create a trophy. It's not what it's about. You're just being there and taking it all in. And it really helps to have just a really good outline of, say, a peak or, like at the perimeter of something, just a quick drawing, and then have fun with the color. I don't like to see people really fussing over really elaborate drawings, because I find that kind of stops the process of really experiencing things while you're there. So, just a simple outline sort of drawing, and then just have some fun with the paint.
Well, that for me would be the hardest part, is having fun, because I think I would stress about it. But I think it would come. It would come.
Right.
There's lots of praise and thanks in the Q&A, just saying how lovely this was. One final question, unless anyone wants to enter any more, is what are you working on now and what's next? You did mention the Wildflowers of the West book, but anything else?
Yes, I have a new project. It's a kind of retrospective of all the places I've been in the West. And over time, I'm noting some of the changes and talking about some of the most inspiring places I've been. And I'm visiting lots of other artists and writers who've been to the same places. So far, we don't really have a title. We're just kind of calling it an artist tour, and this kind of grandiose ideas. It's kind of like, you know, the 19th century Europeans or 18th and 19th century grand tour, the way they used to go, the Brits used to go to, you know, Italy and have a grand tour. Well, it's more of a grand tour of the West. So that's where it is right now.
And that'll be a book, you think?
Yes. Yes, I'm working with the Mountaineers on that one.
Great. Well, that's exciting. I mean, it'll be exciting for you to go and revisit those places for sure.
Mhm.
Okay, one more question came in. Do you have any suggestions for plein air supplies? Keep it simple, question mark?
Um, yeah, my main thing is the paper is real important. Everything else is not at all important, but I've recently discovered these sketchbooks. They're made by a German company called Hahnemühle, and you can get them at Dick Blick. They are really wonderful because they're 100% cotton. And I find when you work on the wood pulp papers, if you're really trying to do watercolors where you have washes and bigger areas of color, you're going to struggle with other types of sketchbooks. Um, if you like pen and watercolor, then you're fine with anything. But I would suggest take a look at these Hahnemühle, and they have different ones. So make sure you look at the 100% cotton ones. And they're not cheap, but I think it's well worth it. Yeah. I did just want to say one thing. If you'd like to join me for a sketch, you know, sketching, plein air, you know, how would you deal with things out there? I do classes. They are Zoom, but I'm going to be doing one on winter sketching in for the Winslow Art Center in January. So you can find it on my website if you're interested in pursuing that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I will be sending out the recording of this tomorrow and we'll include a link to Molly's website, but I'll see if I can't drop it into the chat for everyone as well. But yeah, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up if no one has more questions. And Molly, if it's all right, we could also share your, well, actually people can contact you through your website. So if anyone has any follow-up questions or wants to sign up for one of your classes, that would be a good place to do it. Sorry, and I'm gonna grab I know I have your website sitting here. And here it is. All right, I'm gonna put it in the chat for folks. All right, but again, thank you so much. This was wonderful. And I hope everyone out there feels inspired and either picks up one of Molly's books, signs up for a class, or goes and does their own art out in nature. So it's a good way to get through the cold winter. Take some pictures and do some art. So thank you so much, Molly. We really appreciate you being here with us for Oregon Wild tonight.
Thank you so much, Chandra, and thanks to everyone who attended.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.